Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's event. So this event is being hosted by the Youth Village, and it's entitled Black Generations United, Exploring Global Opportunities. This event is the second in a series of 3 aimed to connect intergenerational Black entrepreneurs in Southern Ontario. Our last event, entitled Black Entrepreneurs Generations United, focused on intergenerational networking. Tonight's event will provide insight on market trends, which will be shared by our wonderful keynote speaker, Moses Richu. For a little background, this topic was selected based on feedback that we received from our first event, where participants cited that market trend opportunities were of most interest to them. Like our last event, tonight's event will also leave time for networking opportunities. And this time we'll have a bit more time to network, so we're really looking forward to connecting again in the breakout rooms later on tonight. So a warm welcome back to those of you joining us for the second time around tonight, and welcome to all of those joining us for the first time. My name is Aaliyah, my pronouns are she, her, and I'll be your MC tonight. I had the honor of emceeing the last event as well, so it's very nice to see some of you again tonight. For a little background about me, I currently work as a policy advisor in the child and youth mental health sector in Ontario, but I'm also the co-founder of a nonprofit program aimed at improving maternal and reproductive health in the Caribbean. So I've been working on entrepreneurship a little bit myself in that space. We're so happy to once again have space for Black entrepreneurs and those interested in entrepreneurship to come together in a space like this. Tonight's event is an inclusive space for all Black identifying entrepreneurs to connect, and we're so excited to have you here. Before diving in, I'd like to note that this event is being recorded, but we will pause recording during the networking session. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging that I am joining this call from land which is now called Ajax, Ontario. Since time immemorial, this land has been the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation. I would also like to note that while we are joining this session virtually and from different places, we are all living and working on stolen land. Today, this land is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. I learned about the local Indigenous territory that my home is on by looking on the website native-land.ca, which will pop in the chat for you. This is an Indigenous-led organization, which we'll share in the chat. If you're not familiar with the traditional land that your home is on, I invite you to take the time to research these traditional territories using that link. So thank you again for joining us tonight. As you know, this event has been organized by the Youth Village, which is a Black-led organization that develops, leads, and expands opportunities for intergenerational conversations among Black entrepreneurs. I would now like to pass it over to Akaji Zakia, a Youth Village Advisory Council member, Black community-focused management consultant, and entrepreneur, to provide tonight's opening remarks.
Thank you, Aaliyah, so much for the warm introduction. As many know, the Youth Village was an idea that Deborah Nurse came up with to help grow a sense of community supporting Black youth. It's exciting to see the organization build momentum, and I'm pleased to welcome each one of you to this evening's event. By being here, you are playing a part in strengthening communities of Black entrepreneurs, and that's why I joined the Advisory Council. All of this would not be possible without McKinsey & Company sharing their expertise and the partnership Youth Village has with the Afro-Caribbean Business Network. Thank you to Ryan and Chris Beth, to Nicola, and as well to Charmaine. Also, funding from the Government of Ontario, particularly through the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. And one final but important thank you is to the hard work of our board of directors, specifically Deborah, Damon, Omar, Kesia, Chantel, and advisory council members who include Donette, Enrique, Kenneth, Kirk, Lisa, and Tony. I hope you all enjoyed the discussions this evening, and back over to you, Aaliyah.
Thanks so much, Akaji, for that introduction. I would also like to note that tonight's event is being supported by the Afro-Caribbean Business Network, which has been a partner on the series. I'll now pass it over to Ryan Knight, co-executive director of the ACBN, to share a few words.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for, let me make sure my color here is all right. And for those that don't know who I am, my name is Ryan Knight, one of the co-founders of the Afro-Caribbean Business Network. And I'd love to say that we are celebrating our 5-year anniversary this year, November. So shout out to the rest of the team, Chris Beth, the founders, and my current co-executive director, Nicola Harris. my heart swells when I'm able to join the Youth Village events. And thank you to Deborah Nurse for reaching out, coming to see me at our business hub here in Mississauga. I know it was a trek, but I feel like it was worth it that we were able to build this relationship together because the intergenerational piece is so key. Here at ACBN, we've dabbled in youth programming, but now being able to be partnered with Youth Village, we're really able to lean in and make sure there's a strong bridge between the different generations. And it's not just senior to youth, there's like senior to that middle generation to youth, and of course, preparing for the generations to come and really taking us out of survival mode and into generational thinking and generational wealth, thinking about the next 10, 20, 50 plus years, and how are we going to create the real strong foundations for our youth to build from. And that to me energizes me, and learning about now how to connect the global expansion and looking at these different trade lines and understanding that we don't just live on Four Corners, we don't just live in Durham, we don't just live in Peel or Ontario, even just in Canada, we are international and we should be building those trade lines. So I'm looking for, I got my pen and paper ready to take some notes about how to do that better. And again, thank you for always building this relationship and inviting ACBN to be a part. So back over to you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And thanks again, ACBN, for your continued partnership here. I would also like to acknowledge the Government of Canada's support through the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario, or FedDev Ontario, for strengthening an ecosystem for our Black entrepreneurs. Finally, I'd also like to mention that we have associates from Fab Inc. with us today who are supporting this event. While they are not members of the Black community, they are passionate about supporting equity and entrepreneurship in Canada. They'll come on camera for a brief moment to wave hello, and then they'll be off camera for the rest of the event to support our tech needs tonight. I'd also like to say that once again, all the music that you heard tonight has been suggested by you as songs that put a smile on your face or make you dance or happy. So we'll be sharing a Spotify playlist with all of these songs. You can listen to them later on after this event. So we have a very exciting schedule for you tonight, and we really can't wait to get started. We're just going to pop it up on the screen now so you can take a look at it. We are going to begin by hearing from our keynote speaker, Moses Richu, who will provide insight on local and global market trends and teach us how to spot opportunities, which is very exciting. And I hope some of you have your pen and paper ready like Ryan to hear a bit more about those. I have mine on the side as well. That will be followed by a brief Q&A before moving into our networking session. Now, the networking component, like I said, was a huge hit during the first event, so I'm sure that there will be some amazing discussions happening in that space tonight. I know in my room last time we had some really amazing conversations. So tonight we're going to have about 30 minutes to network before coming back together to share about our discussions as a group and then close out the event. Also, those who attended last time will know that these events are ones that you want to stay at, not only because there's amazing conversation and learnings, which is already amazing enough, but there are also opportunities to win a prize through a draw. And to get us started, we're going to be doing a draw right now for a $50 Visa gift card to help support your business. And this draw is for the first 40 people that registered for this event. So we're going to pop a wheel of names up on the screen now so we can see who the winner is. Please do also remember that this is a space of no judgment, and most importantly, please have fun and connect with others. Tonight's event really is a great opportunity to learn more about Black businesses across Ontario and globally, and to make some new connections as well. But I am now very excited to introduce our keynote speaker, Moses Richu, who will be leading tonight's session. Moses is an engagement manager in the Toronto office of McKinsey & Company with experience within the banking, public sector, and global energy and materials practices. Prior to joining McKinsey, Mr. Richu had experience in East Africa focused on early-stage venture investing, as well as entrepreneurship. He has a long-lasting commitment to ultimately growing the African continent through business. Tonight, Mr. Richu will share market trends in the Canadian and global landscape with us, and will discuss the direction of future opportunities and what this means specifically for Black entrepreneurs in Canada. So please welcome Moses.
Thanks, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Entrepreneurship is something that's really close to my heart, and I think key to like building the economy, key to building wealth among our communities. And so really excited to be part of this conversation today. As we're thinking about this session and planning it out, we thought what would be really helpful is maybe starting with what are 3 key trends to think about. And then given that these are more global trends, then how do we then think about moving from a massive global trend to like refining your hypothesis on a thing that can actually work for the client segment of the opportunity about targeting. So we'll grow from what are some things to know to what can you do with the things that you now know. I hope that makes sense. So there's 3 trends that we thought we'd focus on today. The first is the massive return of consumer confidence from what we saw with the really big lockdown around COVID. We saw massive increases in savings rates within households, driven by the fact that people weren't really spending. There were pauses on things like repaying loans, etc. And so the amount of household savings significantly increased. When you look at the US, it grew to $3 trillion, which is unprecedented, which creates this capacity for future spend, which would be a great opportunity for entrepreneurs. In addition, there are 2 trends that seem to be sticking. One is this whole home nesting, DIY, do-it-yourself sprint, where you're building your own gyms, you're fixing your floors, etc., which creates a whole new focus segment. And the other is the significant change in consumer loyalty. So loyalty has historically been a fairly sticky thing. But what we saw through COVID and exiting COVID into this current economy we're in is that consumer loyalty has significantly fallen, which creates opportunities for you to build new brands and attract audiences that previously would have been quite sticky to the previous audiences. So that's one big trend. Another big trend is around the resurgence of travel, especially leisure travel. So people were held up for a really long time and they finally get to open up. And you'll have seen this by the mayhem in airports as we reopen. For anyone who's trying going to an airport, it can be quite a challenging experience right now. What you'll see is that it's actually mainly a resurgence on consumer travel, right? So businesses aren't traveling as much yet. And we're actually looking forward, don't think businesses will ever travel to the extent that they used to before. So we think by, say, 2024, especially domestic travel will be at pre-pandemic levels. People will be traveling as they would personally, but we expect that business travel will never grow beyond 80% of pre-pandemic and will kind of cap at that level 2024 and beyond. And so what this means is that some industries, airlines, hotels, etc., that traditionally rely heavily on business travel will need to rethink the offering and say skew more heavily towards consumer offerings or rethink the pricing, marketing, etc. And that tension that we've been seeing in airports around them being extremely logistics being challenging in airports right now, that's because regrowing the capacity that we had before will simply take time, right? You can only have as many passengers on a plane as you have seats on the plane. And so if, for example, airlines had furloughed their pilots and discontinued some planes, those planes need to be brought back into service, pilots need to be trained, etc., and that will take time to redo. And so this is not a constraint that'll be easy suddenly, but it'll take some time to just ramp back up. So this will exist for some time. And the third key trend to talk about is the growth of entrepreneurship. Since, and here we'll specifically look at US data. So the US Census Bureau is looking at new business registrations, and they've been tracking this since 2005. And they've never seen more than 340,000 new business registrations ever until June 2020. And from that time onwards, they've been tracking new highs. So you've seen them go above 340,000 registrations and onwards and continue to grow. And that's really, really exciting because that says people are, 1, confident about the future, and 2, betting on themselves. And that's through that trend has continued despite the fact that unemployment rates have continued to go down, and other factors that should assume would absorb this demand and reduce the number of new businesses that are starting out. So that kind of brings us to the heart of 3 trends to think about. There's money in the economy from consumers. There is a reduction in travel. There was a reduction in travel that's gradually coming back, but it'll be more heavily driven on the consumers, on the personal side rather than the business side. And lastly, there's a lot of enthusiasm around building businesses that is expected to continue to be part of our economy and thus change how people typically work. So these are great trends, but trends are not always directly applicable to us, right? You can go from, okay, so what do I actually do about this? So I have idea X. How do I translate from what you've shared to what I can actually do? And here we're thinking about the work that, so like I flagged earlier, because entrepreneurship is really close to my heart, we actually do a fair bit of work with early stage organizations and companies. And we had a chance to reflect on what are some of the hiccups that organization might face. And one that's often overlooked, but actually quite important, is how much clarity businesses have around their value proposition. Now, the value proposition is at the heart of it, it's a statement that helps you communicate the value to your customer, as well as articulate how you can meet their needs, goals, and pain points. And the reason why it's a common tripping point is because a lot of people think they have it and think that they have a very clear offering that they're going for and a very clear audience that they're targeting, but they haven't quite been as thorough about the process. And so what we thought we'd do is go from, you have these opportunities you've identified, whether they're from the 3 trends that we talked about, or the other opportunities that you're currently pursuing, and then go through a journey where you actually think about pressure testing, whether or not the opportunity you've seen is real. So when you think about value proposition, most products tend to have the benefits fall into one of 3 categories. Either you're better, or you're faster, or you're cheaper, right? When you look at Amazon as the traditional value proposition question, they have a better product offering, they can get it to your house faster, and because of their amazing assortment and logistics, etc., they can get it for you cheaper. So when you're able to combine 3 out of 3, you end up with an extremely compelling offering, but you don't need to have 3 of 3. You can just have one that's significantly better, right? When you look at an example of a very high-end hotel, say you want to go to the Ritz-Carlton. The Ritz-Carlton is not cheaper than another hotel, but it is better. And in some dimensions, maybe they can bring you your food faster, but like the reason you go to Ritz-Carlton is because it's significantly better, right? Does that make sense? So you don't need to have all 3 for you to be a phenomenal business. You can just specialize on one. So now that that's clear, we kind of think about defining your value process across 4 steps. We kind of think about, I've just seen a question come in, I'm just, we're good. We'll have 5 minutes questions after, and then we'll go through more together. So we think about 4 steps to defining your value proposition. The first is empathizing with your current or potential customers. And here it's really putting yourself in their shoes. This means picking up the phone and calling them and asking, well, what do you care about? And a lot of people tend to do this with more distance approaches, right? Like they tend to use surveys or like Google searches. All these are good, but because you're trying to very clearly identify your audience and your potential customers, it really helps to talk to them and follow up with them and just understand what the true pain point they're feeling is. Once you've done that, then you can start thinking through a combination of features that will ultimately make a product that you can then offer to your customers, right? So now this is your journey towards saying, it's not the value prop yet, but it's your journey towards saying, I think that if I offer you 1, 2, 3 things, you will like it and you will pay me for it, and they'll solve problem X for you. Then you then go back to your customers and say, look, these are the list of features or the list of offerings that we can bring, but obviously you can't bring everything to market at the same time. Which of these features matter the most to you? And you prioritize those. So you identify maybe this customer cares more about speed. Then you prioritize the speed capabilities, or they care most about customer service. And at this stage, people typically struggle with how do I prioritize? How do I choose which one's best for me? There's kind of 2 levers you can pull. The first is pick or prioritize the offerings that have the widest ranging potential, so you don't necessarily lose potential clients. And 2, choose the offerings that make you distinct from your competitors. This is really important to consider, especially when your consumers are, which they typically are already fixing the problem that you're addressing in some way. So you need something that's significantly better for them to switch over to you. And so pick the features that enable you to do those 2 things. Be different and address the most number of customers while being different, right? And then once that's done, then you're ready to start crafting your value proposition. Does that make sense? Awesome. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen, and because the value proposition process takes some time and we're only gonna touch it at some level. I'm also going to share some materials with Youth Village, which you can pass on to you to actually run through this exercise yourself. But let me show you what us running through an exercise like this could look like. Give me 1 second to just share my screen, and then I'll use this for a specific brand. So this is for Evernote, which is a note-taking service. Some people use OneNote. We all use different things. But the point is, Evernote is a product that enables you to take notes on your computer, similar to OneNote, etc. Right? The alternative for this is you write notes on a book, or you email yourself. Now, when you think about the need to write notes, there's a couple of fears you have. For me, when I go to meetings and I'm thinking about like writing notes, I'm trying to avoid losing the notes that I got and having to call the client back and say, hey, what did you say about X or Y? Right? So losing things is a core concern. But I'm also trying to maintain flexibility because I need to, for example, be able to access these notes across devices. Right? When you think about the fact that we work in teams, I need to be able to share those notes across different people. And I need to be able to iterate on those things so that they can continue to build on these notes because, for example, we're building a list of consumer perspectives. And so we need to keep building as we understand more deeply what the consumers actually need. So what's on the left-hand side is what I'm saying you'd get by having these calls with consumers, by doing the surveys. That's how you figure out what's actually driving their behavior. And that then tells you what you can then shape out in the right-hand side as your product or service, right? So once you've done what's on the left, you can then go ahead and do what's on the right, by mapping out what's the experience that you want your consumers to have. So in what ways is this better? And then how do you deliver this experience, right? So what are the features that enable you to do this? And then how do you do this in a way that makes it more elegant? So what's on the left column, experience, is what you deliver. This part down here is how you deliver. And this is the experience of having it delivered. Experience, features, benefits. And ultimately, you're now ready to create a value proposition. Right now, these will all be shared with you after, but this is how you think about what your value proposition needs to look like. You need to be able to clearly answer all of these questions. What exactly are you bringing to market? So Evernote is bringing a platform or a system that enables you to take your notes. It helps professionals who want to be able to quickly track notes across meetings by reducing the risk of losing all your notes and having to go back and ask clients for help, and making it really easy to share at all times and access your notes across all devices, unlike writing notes on a book, right? So hopefully that makes it clear in terms of how you think about building and defining your value proposition. And that's how, when you have a clear and distinctive value proposition, that's how you now know you're able to start building your customer base. You can now target this opportunity and you can truly go after it. Before this point, you probably might have a more generic offering, and that's harder to build traction around, harder to attract customers that you want in the scaling that you want. So that brings us to the end. We've kind of talked through three key trends, and then we've talked through how you think about building a valuable, effective value proposition that you can then use to pursue these trends that you've identified. I'd love to pause here and have a few minutes just talk through the questions you might have and help push your thinking along in terms of either stuff we talked about or some other stuff that might be top of mind for you. Here to answer your questions, here to help. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Moses. That was such a great presentation. I think the outline on the value proposition process was very helpful for me and hopefully others as well. And thinking about the steps to take before you actually get that down on paper was really helpful. So thank you. It did also spark some discussion and questions in the chat. I think I saw Akaji had her hand up as well. So I'll pass it to you if you still had a question, Akaji. You're just on mute, sorry.
I kind of made a mistake when I put my hand up, but I had a question now. Moses, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. I saw Jen was maybe leaning this way too. Sources, like how did you draw on your models and where did you get some of how can we do market research data if we can't just quickly pick up the phone kind of thing?
Got it. I just want to clarify because there's like two levels to that question, right? Like level one is sources around identifying like broad trends. Question two is sources around like the value prop and like getting insights from customers. Which the second one?
Well, the first one is the harder one, I think. You know, it's like, well, how do you?
The first one's actually the easier one.
Oh, good. Okay.
Much easier. Let me clarify why I think it's easier. And this is me thinking through the stuff we do with clients, thinking through the work I've done in entrepreneurship. We look at trends. We generally look at trends very broadly, which isn't helpful, right? The analogy I have for this is the advice you get as a child: you can do anything. You can't. If you're not above like 6'4", you are not going to the NBA. Like, you can move on, right? I say this to say that there are only specific realms of expertise that we can actually play within, right? And if you're going to deliver something that's actually a leading offering, then it helps a lot. You don't have to. It helps a lot to play to your strengths, and your strengths are likely limited, right? Because you are human with, right? Like, and so given that, it actually is much more helpful to not solve it from what are the trends and therefore which one should I follow. It's to solve it from where are the opportunities that I have seen based on my unique experiences and exposure, and which of this subset of things do I think is actually viable, right? So that's why I'm saying it's easier, right? And once you've seen this subset of things, you can then, there are many ways to validate it, right? One of which is the value proposition step that I was talking about, right? Can you find enough people who want the problem, who have the problem you've identified, or who want the solution you've identified, right? And if you can't, that by itself is feedback, right? Like, if you've not been able to define your, like, for example, customer profiles or personas, so the people you'd be selling to, in a clear enough way and call enough of them, then that's where you focus first, right? Can you find 10 people to talk to who actually have this need? And if you can't, right? And who are willing to pay you for the need, right? So if you can't, then that's feedback by itself. So I think that the first one's actually quite easy. Once you're confident on it, and once you've tested it through the value prop, then you can circle back, and your research isn't so much focused on trends. It's focused on, does the thing that I've identified where I've seen 10 people or so, is that actually an at-scale problem? And that's how you start verifying it, right? You have an idea, which you source from your own exposure, your own identity, your conversations, etc. You test it to identify that it's actually a need for people. You then test it again to confirm that the people you've met are actually representative of a broader sample, so that you've not just found the 10 who wanted it, right? And then you start leaning into like actually building this out.
Thank you.
No.
Levels.
Great question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moses. That was really, really useful advice. That made me think around, if you can't find the people, maybe you gotta, take a little bit of a step back. So thank you so much. The next question is from a Johnny in the chat. And they say, I'm amazed by how many different types of reports he considers. I'm wondering, what is his usual starting point to assess a market for a new business? For example, what data is the best for the initial analysis to start a new company?
I'd hate to give you the depends answer, but it depends. And let me show you why it depends, right? Which is why it's really helpful to kind of start with where you have expertise, right? So it's harder to answer that question without additional detail. The information you need to start a new law practice, which is a company, is different from glass manufacturing, which is different from selling jewelry, right? All these are new companies, right? But for like law, you need to understand like maybe the barriers to entry, like you need to be a lawyer. Right? So I can't start one, right? For glass manufacturing, there's like physics considerations. For selling jewelry, it's just like, do you know where the market is to sell, and can you like import the right stuff, right? So it's hard to say where to start, but generally speaking, as a shortcut, Google is your friend. And too many people underestimate just how powerful Google is. Right? There are, for most businesses that you think of, there is an example somewhere of that business being done. And a great place to test is Google, right? So by checking how other people somewhere in hopefully a market similar to yours have attempted to do this, you can actually borrow a lot. You can get hints on who their customers are and see if that's relevant for you. You can get hints on how they solve the problem in their market, see if that's relevant for you. So Google is amazing. It also helps to go to things like podcasts. There's a bunch of podcasts that are built for founders. So you just go to Google, top podcast for founders. You'll get that. And then you can also go to knowledge houses. So like McKinsey is a great knowledge house. There's a McKinsey podcast specifically on trends. So check those out, check the reports. And a lot of the stuff is available for free. But check out organizations who are responsible for producing the information that is relevant for you. Right.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Moses, or maybe anyone, if there are any podcasts that you found to be helpful, maybe we can pop some in the chat. You know, it might be great to see what folks are listening to help with things like that. I wanted to also say thank you to you, Moses, for your presentation. This has been so helpful. It sparked a lot of discussion, and we've definitely learned a lot that we can take away. So thank you for that. So thank you all for being so engaged tonight. We had some really great discussion. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight and for your participation and contributions. We really hope that you had a lot of takeaways, and from the chat storm, it looks like you did, and I did as well, so that's great. And that you're able to make some really great connections tonight. If you haven't already, you can use that document to share your contact information so we can keep in touch. There are so many amazing people in this room, and I'm really happy I was able to spend this time learning with all of you tonight and connecting and chatting as well. I'm also very excited to share that the date for our third and final event in this series will be taking place on September 21st with keynote speaker Khalil Dorval. And I'm now going to pass it over to Damon Nurse, who will now provide closing remarks on behalf of the Youth Village, and will share more about that event. Thank you all so much again, and we hope to see you again in September.
Thank you, Aaliyah. I just want to say this event has been so inspiring and really insightful. I want to thank the speaker, Moses Richu, for sharing his great wisdom with us, our MC, Aaliyah, who did a wonderful job as usual, and our excellent breakout room facilitators for creating such a dynamic space for all of us to connect with one another. I also want to thank each and every one of you, our guests, for making this event such a success. As a board member of the Youth Village, it's been a true honor to share this space with all of you tonight. And it actually marks the second of 3 events that we'll be hosting to support Black entrepreneurs in Canada and create a community for all of us to thrive. Each one of you, by being here, is playing a part in shaping and strengthening this community. And you are now officially a part of our village. Being a part of this village is being a part of the solution to support Black and minority entrepreneurs in Canada. Our next event will be taking place on the 21st of September, and as we mentioned, we'll be featuring Khalil Dorval. Mr. Dorval is a mental wellness coach, author, spiritual leader, facilitator, and a recipient of the Invisible Hero Award by the Toronto Police Services and Child Care Services. Khalil will speak about how he has gone about overcoming and navigating systemic injustice as a young entrepreneur and share his personal journey through that. Trust me, I think this is an event you really don't want to miss. We have also just dropped the link, or just about to, where you can sign up for our newsletter so you can get access to tickets as soon as they're released. Finally, I just want to say this event would not have been possible without our partnership with the Afro-Caribbean Business Network, ACBN. So I want to thank Ryan and Chris Beck for the funding from the Government of Canada through the Federal Economic Development Agency for Southern Ontario. One final but very important thank you, and that's to the hardworking members of the Board of Directors and the Advisory Council members of the Youth Village. Without you, this event would not have been possible. I hope you've all enjoyed tonight, as I truly have. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you very soon in September. Thank you. Bye-bye.